Freedom flew in the Georgia State House chambers today. Freedom the bald eagle, Georgia Southern University's live mascot, made an impressive appearance at the end of the singing of the national anthem. Good evening. Welcome to Lawmakers on day 5 of the Georgia legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. After a week of budget hearings, both chambers returned today to start working on some of the issues they learned about last week and other priorities. Among them, another attempt at legislation to define anti-Semitism. We'll have 2 lawmakers on the show to talk about whether the legislation has a better chance this year in light of the rise of anti-Semitism nationwide. Also on the show, 2 strong supporters of the governor's proposal to increase payouts for the Hope Scholarship. Let's get right down to the Capitol, where our Rochelle Ritchie is standing by with the Capitol Report. Rochelle?
Well, Donna, Speaker John Burns last week in an hour-long press conference laid out his agenda for this legislative session, and today a special visitor in the Senate. U.S. Representative Rich McCormick made a quick visit to the Senate this morning. McCormick, who represents Georgia's 6th congressional district, was there to promote his vision of the importance of state government.
Every single one of you, when you represent your people on the state level, that 10th Amendment is sacred. And I want to make sure that when we are looking at government, and this includes you too, that when you're representing the ultimate minority, which is the individual, that we take that very much to heart when we talk about everything, every law that we make, every law that we get rid of, but that we're working together with that in mind.
In the same vein, the Democratic Minority Leader, Gloria Butler, read her list of priorities for this session, but also stressed the need for cooperation.
Accountability and transparency in the way we operate as a legislative body is just the beginning, for they are the foundation of all our priorities and work on the behalf of the people of Georgia. With that, we look forward to coming to a consensus on many issues on behalf of all of our constituents.
And Senator John Albers took to the dais and spoke passionately against the shooting of a state trooper last week and the subsequent violent demonstrations that took place.
Interesting to note that minus 1 person from Georgia, everyone arrested was from out of state. They don't even live here. So let's send a strong message to them. Go home, you're not welcome. If you want to come to our state to incite violence and cause harm, then turn around before you came.
Sadly, this is not the first time we are seeing these kinds of headlines. And if we don't come together here to lead by example, to find solutions to what is causing and enabling this kind of reckless behavior, we will continue to see violence in our communities with people shot and businesses vandalized. At the same time, we must protect the right to peaceful protest, which is foundational to our country.
In the House, things get off with an ode to America. Land of the free! And a beautiful display of American representation. The bald eagle. Sunday marked the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and Dems wasted no time honoring its passage 50 years ago.
On what would have been the 50th anniversary of protections under Roe v. Wade, we stand here committed to defending reproductive rights and continuing our nation's progress toward equality for all.
The recognition countered by Republicans.
When we follow the science, we must acknowledge that unborn children are living, unique individuals. Why should this vulnerable group not deserve the same human rights that the rest of us enjoy?
Reproductive rights will be front and center this legislative session as House Bill 481 now sits on the desk of the Georgia Supreme Court, an issue on which Speaker Burns made clear he is not wavered.
We addressed the right of the unborn to protect the unborn in House Bill 481 back in, I believe it was 2019. I supported that legislation, continue to stand by it.
The Speaker,
I'm excited about a lot of things.
During an hour-long press conference last week, laid out his plans to address education funding, runoff elections, and crime.
I'm committed to doing that, no matter which side of the aisle you sit on.
Right now, there is a push by Representative Jasmine Clark to extend future runoffs from 4 weeks to 6 weeks, an issue the Speaker has not decided on.
I have not made a decision as far as runoffs go, as far as personally or as far as working with the leadership in the House. We have some very talented people who know a lot about election law, and I look forward to working with them.
And Senator Parent is expected to deliver the response from Senate Democrats to Governor Kemp's State of the State address on Wednesday. That is my Capitol Report. Donna, back to you.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. The Anti-Defamation League reports a 5-year upswing in documented anti-Semitic incidents involving everything from harassment and vandalism to violence directed at Jewish people. Joining me now are 2 Georgia lawmakers who are also both attorneys who are looking to get a handle on how the state deals with the disturbing rise in anti-Semitism. Republican Representative Chuck Efstration is the new House Majority Leader and represents Decula in Gwinnett County, and Democratic Representative Esther Panich is the newly elected representative from Sandy Springs. She is the only Jewish legislator in the Georgia General Assembly. So welcome to Lawmakers to both of you. So I'm going to start with you, Leader Efstration. And by the way, congratulations on your position as Majority Leader. You haven't been on the show yet, so I hadn't had a chance to say that.
Real honor.
So as one of several sponsors of this bill, tell us exactly what HB 30 is about.
This legislation defines anti-Semitism in Georgia law. It's a really important step that we take, and legislation was introduced last year that passed the Georgia House of Representatives. It would enable prosecutors to prosecute crimes perpetrated due to anti-Jewish intent, and also would allow for classification to be made in our state code that state officials could recognize. Many other states have done this, and it's an important step for Georgia to take.
Yeah, actually, Esther, you've looked into this, Representative Panich, and so you're saying Georgia is kind of behind other states on this.
Yes, according to the Jerusalem Post that just put out an article about this, 30 other states have already passed this type of legislation, either through legislation or executive action. So Georgia is actually behind the rest of the country in doing this.
So I mentioned that you're the only Jewish person in the Georgia General Assembly. Talk about what that history is about and how large is the Jewish community in the state of Georgia?
Well, the Jewish community in the state of Georgia is approximately 150,000 people. So in a state of about 11 million people, that's a little over 1.36%. And so we should have some representation in the House, just like any other minority group. With one member, me, that is 0.04%. So we are lacking in representation, and I'm hopeful that by being here and speaking out about it, that I can convince other people, either Democratic or Republican, to run for office, because we do need diverse votes. We need diverse voices in government, and the Jewish voice deserves to be represented as well.
And let's talk about this. You decided to run for a specific reason, and that's because of Representative Mike Walensky decided not to run again.
Yes. Well, I've always been kind of interested in politics, but didn't intend to run in this cycle, and wasn't sure if I would ever run. And then it took Jen Jordan and Josh McLaurin, 2 non-Jews, who told me that since Mike Walensky was not planning on running again, there would be no Jewish voice in the Georgia legislature. I was shocked. I needed to confirm that. I did. And then I essentially turned to my husband and said, if you can't think of a reason I shouldn't run, I'm going to run. And that was that. And here we are.
Yeah, and so you looked in the history a little bit of it. The first person was you're the first female.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
It's, I think her name was Karen Steinberg,
okay.
Who I met recently. We hosted a Shabbat dinner at my synagogue for a bipartisan group of legislators. I was hoping to have individual legislators, if I was elected, at my home with my husband for Shabbat dinners on Friday night to get to know other legislators and have them get to know me and other Jewish members of the community, because people, not necessarily in the metro area, but in rural Georgia, some people have never met a Jewish person. And so they don't necessarily know. And so some things they might say may be out of ignorance and not hate. And so there are teachable moments that we can use. And instead, the American Jewish Committee, Dov Wilker, suggested hosting a big Shabbat dinner. My synagogue was game, and we hosted one. We had about 30 to 40 legislators and other elected officials, and 200 people came to the event. It was really successful. It kind of blew us all away. And most of the people who attended had never attended a Jewish event before. So it was really educational for a lot of people. And we're hoping to continue that, and not just in other branches of government. The judiciary has already asked to do something like this, but around the state. People should know their neighbors. And it's a good way to teach others about people in the state.
Yeah. I want to get back to the bill a little bit. So HB 30 gives some legal teeth to if there was a hate crime or any anti-Semitic behavior.
So, Donna, in 2020, the Georgia General Assembly passed the anti-hate crimes law. I actually was the sponsor of that legislation. And really, in the years since then, we've seen an important need to continue that effort. First, with the repeal of the citizens arrest law that was supported by Governor Kemp, and more recently, with Chairman John Carson, who really brought this issue initially up, along with Representative Walensky, and the importance of having a definition of anti-Semitism in our code that can then be utilized by state officials to define potential hate speech that might be made, or to make a determination as to whether crimes perpetrated should be prosecuted under a hate crimes classification. It's really a helpful means for these prosecutors and officials. And the standard that's used, the definition in this legislation, is a nationally and internationally accepted standard. So we have great commonality with similar legislation in other states.
Let's talk about something you mentioned earlier to me, and that is your interest in this goes back to a family member.
So we were talking earlier, I think you asked me about folks who may try to deny that the Holocaust occurred. And growing up, my grandfather, who was in the Big Red 1 1st Infantry Division, talked about liberating a concentration camp in Europe as a U.S. soldier. And hearing from him the direct in-person testimony about what happened is very personally important to me and impactful in my life. And I think the importance of acknowledging hate that has occurred and the attack that it is on all of us when hateful acts or hateful means of intimidation are perpetrated makes it all the more important that we have a definition for anti-Semitism in our law.
And you've had pretty good bipartisan support of this, of what you've done so far, and definitely in the House.
Absolutely. The legislation passed last year with bipartisan support. I'm very hopeful that the bill will pass the House and the Senate this year and be sent to Governor Kemp for his consideration. Yeah.
Anything you wanted to add when it comes to this legislation? I know you're happy to be here to really push this.
Well, I'm grateful to Mike Walensky and John Carson and to the majority leader for continuing to push this. Obviously, we need allies in the community, and we couldn't do this alone. I certainly couldn't do this without, I didn't do this. This has started before me, and I'm just happy to be here to help push this along. But we're grateful. Jewish community has never seen a rise of anti-Semitism in this country like we are right now. It's anywhere we go to pray, we have to have armed guards at all times. So it's not just for high holidays, but we have to have them every Saturday and Friday night at our services. So it's a real threat that we live with, and anything that could help reduce the threat or punish any conduct that has taken place because we are being targeted because we are Jews helps us stay safe. So I appreciate it. all the help that we are getting.
And then as an attorney, did you recognize that there wasn't anything in law for any of the crimes that might be committed against people in the Jewish community?
Yes, and I'm also conscious that this doesn't violate the First Amendment. This doesn't criminalize speech, it criminalizes conduct. And this gives some guidance with the definition in the general definition section of what is and is not discriminatory intent or would be violative of state law. So it's important to recognize that this deals with conduct and how to address the intent of that conduct.
Yeah, so you can't touch conduct when it comes to this. I don't think everybody realizes that the definition is so important. Why it's a definition of what, and explain a little bit about what that entails.
Absolutely. So it's often difficult for prosecutors to classify what would meet the threshold for a hate crimes offense.
Give a definition. Give us an example.
Sure. So, so if a swastika is posted somewhere, does that meet the definition? Would be the question. And this would make very clear that that would satisfy that definition. And that's important because acts like that are done for the purpose of intimidation. It's not only targeting a specific group of individuals, but it's targeting law and order in all of society, and it must be addressed in our laws. And so that's why I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation, and I think it's an important next step continuing from the anti-hate crimes law that was passed several years ago.
Yeah, and so it's dealing with harassment, some of the things that we probably don't even think of, that you probably have heard about, right?
Yes, it would deal with assault as a basis. If you think of any hate crime against somebody who's gay, somebody who's black, these are already protected areas and defined areas. We need to define them for Jews as well.
Yeah, I think there are people who didn't realize that this law didn't exist, and they are rooting for you when it comes to this. So thank you so much. Thanks for both of you to coming on the show. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll come back and tell us more about it.
Thank you.
So coming up, we'll talk about the good news on the horizon when it comes to the Hope Scholarship. We'll look at what's planned and the journey to get here. You're watching Lawmakers on GPB TV.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
You make a good team.
As long as we're together, it's perfect.
Dreams do come true. Hey, lad?
Seems they do.
Something deeply dangerous is happening here. This is just beginning.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
My heart is racing right now.
Fasten your seatbelt. This season we have 21 incredible guests. It's wild.
It's really something.
And there are so many highlights. I feel like a time traveler.
You're uncovering the truth.
These are consequential things.
Yeah.
Mind blown. What do you have? Spies working for you? How did you find this?
Oh, look at everybody.
You have a DNA cousin.
Oh my God!
That's Bill Hader. You know him?
Of course.
I wish my mom could be here to see this.
What?
That's very moving, actually.
Your ancestors came on the Mayflower.
I've got history. I feel the presence of all these people.
What a treasure. Those are some of the incredible stories of the new season of Finding Your Roots.
Tuesday on GPB.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. The legislation establishing the Hope Scholarship in the early 1990s is arguably one of the most popular education laws to come out of the Georgia General Assembly. Now, Governor Brian Kemp is supporting an expansion of the eligibility, and it's receiving bipartisan support.
I rise to briefly just shine some light on something wonderfully positive that came out during budget week. Our governor announcing that for the first time in 11 years, we will fully fund tuition at Georgia's public colleges and universities for those that earn the Hope Grant and Hope Scholarship. It's a big deal. It makes a big change in the lives of students, families, and our workforce, and I could not be more thrilled.
That message on the House floor this morning with all that applause from one of our guests tonight, Democratic State Representative Stacey Evans of Atlanta. We're also happy to have with us the chairman of the House Higher Education Committee, Chuck Martin. Welcome to Lawmakers, both of you. Thanks so much. Chairman Martin, the governor announced expanding the Hope Scholarship when he presented his plan during video conferencing last week when he was in Switzerland and he announced this. Pretty big news. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, well, the governor in his budget plan will move to 100%, for the current year, the funding if one is in the Hope Scholarship or the Hope Grant. I think last year we moved it to 90, the baseline 90. Some were already above 90. So this will move up for everyone, some a few percentage points at the max 10%. And actually this is a great step, but not the end. We have to be concerned with not only those that have Hope now that are eligible for that merit-based scholarship, but we have to be concerned with our workforce. So I see this as a step that we make, and I applaud the governor for working toward that. But we must remember that the students that put skin in the game, whether it was 90% or 6% of the Hope, they felt like they were part of the plan, if you will, and then we have other students that we need to drive into the workforce, because the days are gone when a simple degree is all you needed to make it in this business environment now. You need the right degree to do that. So this is a good first step.
Yeah, let's talk about this. You've championed it a long time, and there are definitions we need to get out. The difference between the Hope Scholarship and the Hope Grant. Some people aren't clear on what they are.
Absolutely. Well, when Hope was first established in the early 90s, there were two pieces to it: the Hope Scholarship, the Hope Grant. The Hope Scholarship was to help students who were going to our four-year public colleges and universities, and also some funding available for those that choose to go to Georgia private colleges and universities. But the Hope Grant was given a different name for a reason. It wasn't a scholarship, it was a grant. Never had a GPA requirement in the beginning. It was just something where you needed to maintain adequate yearly progress. And if you did so, then you received grant money to attend Georgia's technical colleges. One of the best systems that we have going in the state, our technical college system.
Yeah, so the grant still existed, but in a different way. Explain what the governor is doing that will help the grant part of this.
Absolutely. So when the scholarship and the grant were first established in the 90s, they were providing full tuition scholarships or grants for those that earned the scholarship or the grant. In 2011, those programs were changed dramatically. So for the first time ever, the Hope Grant gained a GPA requirement, which cut a significant portion of technical college students off completely, about 25%. We saw a 25% decline in enrollment. The scholarship changed in that it was no longer going to be enough to get a full scholarship if you had a 3.0 GPA. You now had to have a 3.7 and a 1200 math verbal SAT score, which is very high. A lot of students no longer met those benchmarks, and so then they would be receiving what we started calling Hope Light, which was a percentage of tuition that could change. And the worst part about that was that students, particularly from lower incomes, couldn't plan. They didn't know from year to year what it was going to be covering. That was a particularly big deal at our technical college system, where you have more first-generation college students that are more likely to be from household incomes of less than $40,000. So even if it was just 10% or just 15% that you had to pay, it could be more than you have. And so if you don't have it, even if it's $1 million or $400,000, you don't have it.
Yeah. So, Chairman Martin, let's talk about why things changed. And part of it had to do with the money comes from the lottery, and a lot of people don't realize the Georgia Lottery funds the Hope Scholarship. And there was a worry that there wasn't going to be enough in that pot, right?
Well, there were simply not. And really, there are only about 15, maybe 20 at the most House members that still serve in the legislature that were there for that time in 2011. I think Stacey was there as well. But she and I remember it was a hard thing to do, but we wanted to preserve that. And I mean, I think it's fair, to share the excitement of 100%. But I think also going back to the Hope Grant, Hope hours are $100 a credit hour. So we got the funding for that up to 90% last year before this was done. So full load, if you were to take it at a technical college, would be 12 hours, $1,200. You're talking about 10%, $120 a semester that this is adding. So every dollar counts. Most certainly it does. But actually, what we need to continue to work on is reasons that people started at technical college can't stay, whether life gets in the way. We did a lot of that. Stacey and many in the House last year supported 1435, which was a completion grant for technical colleges and the university. I think those are the things that we've got to stay laser focused on so that our folks that are looking to improve their lives, to improve their outcomes, their earning ability, can do that. Certainly we can be excited about the 90 to 100%, but we have to remember that some skin in the game, $120 a semester that this will make up, it is a small portion. It's the life things in the way that we've got to work with people and focus them on careers that will make a difference and make them be wage earners that can support families here in Georgia.
Yeah. So what's different now is the Georgia's different. First of all, there's the workforce issue, and you mentioned that also. But also, there's more money coming in the Georgia Lottery, right?
There's more money coming in the Georgia Lottery today, and there's actually a reduction in students a little bit during the pandemic, which provides a difference into the reserve, that the reserve has a bit more money than it has had in the past.
Now, and so I've got to bring this up, and that is the talk that we're hearing, of your colleagues really pushing for for sports betting and other gambling that would have the money go into to that same pot. And so I want to know how you feel about legalizing gambling, sports betting, some version of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I support efforts to bring sports betting, horse racing, and perhaps eventually casino style gambling. We know that Georgians are participating in these activities and they're raising revenues for other states. I think here in Georgia, particularly starting with sports betting is probably very palatable to the legislature right now. But I want to address, we do have very healthy amount of dollars coming into our Lottery for Education Fund, which allows this move. I would argue that we could have afforded it several years ago, and perhaps even in 2011 if we had prioritized correctly. But right now, we have nearly $2 billion with a B sitting in the Lottery for Education reserve funds. Only $600 million of that is required to be held. Under law, we have to hold $600 million. There's a formula that gets us there. That's what we have to hold. That means we're sitting on right now $1.3 billion that we could use for Hope, scholarships, grants, pre-K, and other educational endeavors. I agree with Chairman Martin that we need to continue to do more because there are certain segments of our society that are not getting into higher ed, and I would submit it's because they don't have the money. So needs-based aid is important. And I know I have to say this one thing. Students will always have skin in the game, whether we are covering 90% or 100% of tuition, because they have to feed themselves, they have to have a place to live, and they're always going to have to pay for those mandatory fees.
Quick response to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, first to go back, I think that you asked about the revenue sources in sports betting, horse racing, casino. Those are all separate things. I think this year, the sports betting could probably be done, without a constitutional amendment if it's done the proper way and the money is focused into the Hope Scholarship. That's certainly something we can do. And I do think we would be focused. I would agree and disagree with Representative Evans on the same thing about the $2 billion in there. We're spending over $1.3 billion, I think, a year on HOPE is our funding allocation. So $2 billion is a lot of money, but when you're spending over half of that on an annual basis to fund HOPE, one has to be careful.
Unfortunately, we are going to have to end it there because we only have time to say goodbye, and we'll return tomorrow for day 6 of the Georgia legislative session. Have a good night.